Good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome to the University of Kentucky Lewis Honors College. I am Laura Bryan. I'm the acting dean of the college. And it's a real honor to host a special event today in partnership with the Office of Philanthropy. I really appreciate that all of you have joined us today. And I also want to acknowledge and thank our virtual audience. I heard that we have over 150 individuals watching live stream on YouTube. Before we begin, I want to recognize Scott and Kelly Parsons for their generous support of today's event. Both are Kentucky natives. Scott is a Gatton College of Business and Economics alumnus, and Kelly is a Murray State and Northwestern alumna. They just relocated in the past year from Connecticut to Lexington. We're delighted to have them here full-time in their community here. At this time, I would like to invite Scott to make a few comments.
Thank you so much, Dean Bryan. It's just a real great pleasure to be here. We want to offer a special thanks to the Office of Philanthropy. This event has been in planning for 2 years, and obviously because of COVID and other things last year, we had to postpone. So we're grateful that we are able to actually gather together today, and I think you're going to find Dr. Wright's talk very fascinating. Kelly and I hope to be able to do this. We hope it's the foundation of a new program to bring in speakers on an annual basis on topics that are of interest both to our students and the faculty as well. I do want to say a big, big thanks to the Office of Philanthropy. As I mentioned, they have been super to work with. We are forever grateful to Brent Piper, who has really shepherded this event from its very infancy. And so to Brent and to the entire team over there, Kelly and I are truly grateful. We also want to acknowledge that this is actually a family affair today, that in addition to Dr. Wright and his wife Sherry, that his son Andrew and his wife Melanie are here. Andrew's been over at the law school this morning. He's been talking to students. He gave a lecture, and I think he's doing a little bit of recruiting for his firm too. But we are very grateful for their presence as well. And now, without further ado, let me give it back to you, Dean Bryan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you again to Scott and Kelly. We really appreciate your passion for making today possible. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Craig Wright. In the spirit of homecoming weekend on campus, this is somewhat of a full circle homecoming experience for Dr. Wright. Some of the early days of his career were actually spent here at the University of Kentucky, where he served as an assistant professor of music in 1972. Then after UK, Dr. Wright joined the faculty of Yale University and continued there for the duration of his career. He served as the chair of the Department of Music and the academic director of online education, which I learned this morning was quite a new endeavor for Yale at that time. And he's now the Henry L. and Lucy G. Moses Professor of Music Emeritus. Just a few of his honors. Dr. Wright was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship and an honorary doctorate of humane letters from the University of Chicago. And in 2010 and 11, he was elected a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Wright has published 7 books on music and cultural history, the most recent being The Hidden Habits of Genius, which has been recognized as an Amazon Top 20 book selection for 2020. Dr. Wright is a graduate of the Eastman School of Music and holds an MA and PhD from Harvard. And I also learned this morning that he's trained as a classical pianist. Dr. Wright?
Oh, sorry.
On behalf of the Lewis Honors College faculty, staff, and students, it's our privilege to host you today, and we welcome you back to the University of Kentucky. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dean Bryant. I got so enamored listening to my own introduction that I forgot to come forward. Okay, well, let's hope we have some fun today. Thanks particularly to Scott and Kelly Parsons, our benefactors of the university. Thanks to Dean Bryan, of course. Thanks to Brent Piper. I think he was already mentioned by Scott earlier on. Some other folks have been helping me out. Kate Joseph, Sarah Fitzgerald, Laurie Wilson. Where's Laurie? She's over there. Lots of people to thank. And thank, of course, the Lewises for putting together this splendid facility. And most importantly, I think, thanks to faculty and students for joining me today. So my aim today, in a way, is to emphasize that there is much by way of a connection between what I'm going to be talking about today, genius, and an honors college. Here we are in the Lewis Honors College. So who here is a genius? Raise your hand. Come on now, don't be shy. Who's a genius? Well, of course, you can't very well do that in this country. You may be thinking that, but you're keeping your hand down, right? So what in simple terms is genius? Well, a very quick and short way of saying this is, in a sense, exceptional human accomplishment. An honors college, such as we have here, honors and encourages exceptional human accomplishments. So maybe you are all geniuses, or at least genius facilitators, because you are encouraged this wonderful mission of the Lewis Honors College. Okay. Every good, it seems to me, or at least a halfway decent public presentation, ought to have an agenda, right? So what are we up to today? What's up, Doc? What is genius? We'll be talking about that. Part 2, what genius is not. Part 3, the habits of genius. And Part 4, how you too can think like a genius. But first, a word or two about me. Dean Bryan mentioned a couple of things here. I started out in life wanting to be, well, actually a professional golfer. That didn't work out so well. Then I wanted, it was back in the days of Van Cliburn. You probably heard of this name. My mother looked at me and said, "You two are tall. You have these enormous hands. You can be the next Van Cliburn." So off I was packed to the Eastman School of Music. I had the very best teachers, had the best instruments. I had the strongest work ethic. I lacked only one thing: musical talent. I had no absolute pitch, no special hand-eye coordination, no special musical memory. I could tell I was not going to earn a dime as a classical pianist. So off I went to Harvard to get a PhD in musicology. And then I came to the University of Kentucky for a year, as Professor Bryant mentioned. It was a wonderful year. And then up to Yale, where I spent really the next 44 years essentially teaching the 3 Bs of classical music: Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. But while I was there, the most interesting person that I ran into was actually an M, Mozart. How many of you have seen the film Amadeus? Okay. If you haven't, go back and take a look at it. It doesn't age. Won 8 Academy Awards. It's all about, obviously, Mozart. I got very interested. Is this possible that somebody could have all of this wonderful music just in their head and just sit down and write it all out? So off I would go in the summers and during various leaves around Western Europe. It wasn't a hardship assignment to go to Krakow and go to Berlin and Vienna and Salzburg and Paris and all these places, looking at Mozart autographs to see if it were really true, see how many corrections were there. Well, it's pretty much true. And once I was in Florence, and I became fascinated by the sketchbooks of Leonardo da Vinci. Now, I didn't have to do much there because they're all available in facsimile edition. I didn't have to go anywhere. I could sort of buy them and see what's in them, or go online eventually and see what's in there. And that caused me, what an interesting fellow, that caused me to think about Albert Einstein. So I began reading secondary sources. I didn't know enough science as a graduate of the Eastman School of Music, didn't know enough science to be able to understand the science of it. But the biography was fascinating, and I began to see commonalities between Einstein and Leonardo and Mozart. Well, if you're working in the sciences, well, who's the one person to have won 2 Nobel Prizes in separate scientific fields? Only one person, Marie Curie, right? So better find out about that. And then that too, women's studies. Yes, the woman's in the game here. Oh yeah, Virginia Woolf wrote this wonderful book called A Room of One's Own. Anybody ever bumped into that? Oh, It's the mother lode in terms of gender studies in some ways. Well, that takes me into the area of how some people have been marginalized and not allowed to get into the game. And what about disabilities? When is a disability actually an ability? So off I would go, and off this quest for genius became. So there I am. I'm teaching a course at Yale on genius. I've written this book about genius. So I must be a genius, right? I must be a genius. No, no, wrong, wrong, wrong. Truth in advertising here. When I told my now 4 grown children that I was going to write a book on genius and teach a course on genius at Yale, they thought that was the funniest darn thing that they'd ever heard. You? You're no genius. You're a plodder. And you know what was really annoying? My wife, who was sitting out there, you know what she said? She said, he's no genius. He's no genius. But sometimes in life, the person on the outside looking in can actually see more clearly. If you can do something very easily, maybe you're not the person that can analyze how that is done. The geniuses that I would have the honor of spending time with, and I think it include 4 Nobel Prize winners over time, were so busy being geniuses that they were unable or uninterested in figuring out how the magic happens. So being a bit curious, I just sort of plodded along. Okay, what did I learn in my now 15 years of study of this particular topic? In broad terms, I learned 2 things. One, that genius is very different than what I thought it was when I started out. And 2, what makes genius, related, what makes genius is also very different from what I expected. But first of all, get this really going, we need a definition of genius. So let me give you a definition of genius, just one person's definition of genius for today. It may change it tomorrow, but and this is, you can have your own and you're encouraged to have your own. A genius is a person of extraordinary mental powers whose original works or insights, note the plural there, change society in some significant way for good or for ill across cultures and across time. Let's parse this definition out then, word by word. A genius is a person, male, female, transgender, doesn't matter. Mental powers. Mental powers. Well, what about winning an Olympic medal in weightlifting? Mental powers? Would title world's greatest sumo wrestler. Well, I wouldn't really admit those people, at least into my pantheon of genius. It has to be mental powers, but you could think about that. Works or insights, again, the plural. Presumably, the genius has to be more than a one-trick pony. It has to be more than a one-off event of genius. What about these folks then? Georges de Mistral, he invented Velcro. Probably look around at some shoes here, we can probably see a lot of it still being used in the room today. But I don't know of anything else that Georges de Mistral invented. What about the Post-it note? Art Fry here, same sort of thing. A sole event. Lonnie Johnson, great thing, use it with kids, the swimming pools, etc. Super soaker squirt gun, but nothing else as far as I know. On the other hand, Shakespeare wrote 37 transformative plays, and they are long. They went for many of them for 3 hours. Picasso created 20,000 works of art. Edison filed 1,093 patents in the United States alone. So it seems that the genius not only hits a target that no one else can see, but also hits that target many, many times. Okay, to continue. Works, novelty versus creativity. Now, what is novelty? What is creativity? What is possibly the difference? Maybe it has to do with impact. These are novel creations. Anybody seen anybody wandering around Louisville or Lexington, Frankfurt dressed like this? They're novel, right? But nobody else dressed like this, so it didn't have any impact. Maybe you could say, therefore, these are not particularly creative. Maybe to be creative, you have to have impact. For good or for ill. For good or for ill. What about this person? Is he a genius? Is he a genius? Or is he an evil genius? Or is he a psychopath? Well, question arises then, if you're a genius, do you only have to do good? Is that a prerequisite for genius? Is that part of our definition? Across time and across cultures. Well, I like to to exemplify this by these slides. One is an antibiotic, penicillin. The other is a Kanye West tennis shoes. Yeezy tennis shoes. Anybody run into these? Anybody wearing one? Hi, there we go. No. Okay, good for you. Lots of these sold these days, but they're not necessarily sold around the world, right? I would ask that gentleman what he paid for his shoes, but we don't know to embarrass him. But they can go up to $500, I read, for one of these pairs of shoes. And they have a shelf life, right? You wear out tennis shoes. On the other hand, penicillin has now been around for 80 years, and I read that it has saved about 200 million lives. So it's very different. It has greater impact, greater significance, greater global staying power. So impact, staying power, cross cultures, cross time, that would seem to be important. So there you have it. We're finished. We're done with this. We have a definition of genius. A person of genius is an extraordinary mental powers whose original works or insights change society in some significant ways across time. Okay, let's go back here one slide. Can somebody repeat my definition of genius? And that's what I found out with students over time. It's sort of worthless. He really is not a genius. If that's the best he can do. Because nobody can remember. It has no impact. Now, Einstein was a genius. He came up with this theory. E equals mc squared. So non-genius, Craig borrows from his good friend Albert here. And this is what Einstein said. A genius is someone who takes a very complex idea and turns it into a simple one. You ever think about the fact that university professors might actually do the exact opposite? And I'm just as guilty as the next person here. So a genius is someone who takes a very complex idea and turns it into a simple one. All right, so let's take, instead of E equals mc squared from genius Albert, we're going to go to G equals S times N times D for non-genius Craig. Genius equals significance times time times the number of people impacted. And the issue of duration is factored in there as well. Genius equals significance and number of people impacted and duration and impact. Let's talk about duration just a bit. Just a hypothetical question for you here. Which would you rather be? Someone who influences 1 billion people for 1 year, or someone who influences 1 million people for 1,000 people for a year? 1 billion people for 1 year, or 1,000 people over 1 million years? Okay, which would you rather be? How many would rather influence 1 billion people this very year? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2. Oh, really? How interesting. We have very few celebrities here and a lot of geniuses. But this is the honors college, right? So we would expect no less. All right, that gets us thinking about the issue of duration and impact. And what's the difference between genius and celebrity? Is it possible that celebrities are merely people of the moment with little lasting impact? So let's play a game here. You get to choose. Which do you think? Is it Dolly or is it Brittany? Okay, let's vote. This is a democracy here, okay? How many think it's Dolly? Raise your hand. How many think it's Brittany? I love the people, the outsiders with a lot of force. Good for you. Okay, we have contrarian thinking here. I would definitely side, and I just get one vote here too. I would definitely side with Dolly. And we could go around the room if we had time, and each of you could say why, but you probably know better than I, having to not only to do with Dollywood, but taking country music into the realm of pop music. She doesn't just do covers, as Brittany does, covers of other composers. She writes her own music, and she gives that music to the Bee Gees or Whitney Houston or whoever it might be, and they popularize her particular songs. But perhaps more importantly is her work with, say, something like the song 9 to 5 and the movie 9 to 5 and the whole issue of violation of females and the whole issue of pay equality and holding on to one's intellectual property, which she was able to do when she was working with Porter Wagner, things such as that. So that's why my vote there would go for Dolly as more of an influencer. What about these two? Here we've got the sporting news. Sporting news, the genesis of genius. So on the left, in the left corner, we have Michael Jordan. and the word genius is used there. And on the right, in the right corner, we have Muhammad Ali, Kentucky's own Muhammad Ali, right? From Louisville, right? Okay. So which would you vote for here? How many think Michael Jordan? Raise your hand. The gentleman in the back is completely consistent. Good for him. How many think Muhammad Ali? Okay, overwhelmingly in favor of Muhammad Ali, and I probably don't for this particular group, and if you've been watching PBS, there's a 10-part Ken Burns documentary there, impactful, and he has had impact with regard to political activities, war resistance against perhaps ill-thought-through ventures, and particularly the Black Lives Matter, being a prophet of the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, here's another game for us. We're going to play the game of go into. It's a game with, I hope, making another point. On the screen, you see a staircase leading up to the Genius Hall of Fame. First of all, who are these people? Well, it's a little hard to see for it's not the huge screen. So we see Martin Luther King there, and then Albert Einstein. Who's the person on the left? This is mostly questions for students. Person in the center, Gandhi, right? Then person to Gandhi's more to the left in the red coat. Yeah, that's my friend Mozart. And then over there, all the way to the left. Good, okay. Gentleman down here, and down here nailed it. Okay, good for you. Frida Kahlo. All right, so here we go with go into. Well, we have stairs leading to the Genius Hall of Fame. Who are we going to put up there, top, front, and center? It's your call, but let's say, supposing you're interested in politics and democracy, and you're a person of color. Well, you might possibly put Gandhi right up there in the pedestal, right front and center at the top, and then maybe King, and then maybe Frida Kahlo, and down to bottom, Einstein and Mozart. But let's say you were from Central or Eastern Europe, and you're very much interested in music and mathematics. Well, maybe you'd come up with a completely different ranking. Maybe Mozart, Einstein, King, Frida Kahlo, and Gandhi down there at the bottom. So what do we learn from this little game of go into? Genius is whatever and whoever we want to make it. Well, is that just a populist activity here? It's whatever we, the people, decide. Genius is a societal construct. How do we decide? How do we vote? We vote by the books we buy over at the Barnes & Noble bookstore, for example. Biographies of different sorts of people. We vote by the type of college courses offered. And maybe a course in Shakespeare, maybe a course on Toni Morrison. We vote by the type of music that we stream, whether through Spotify or we go to a classical concert in a concert hall at some place or another, or particularly in art galleries. Whoever is getting displayed in an art gallery at a given time, that's in a sense a vote for genius. These are the people that we are paying attention to over the centuries. But again, it's ever changing. Genius is not an absolute, I would submit. It's relative to time, place, and culture. Let me try to make that point a slightly different way. Consider this gallery of images that you see on the screen here. Now, I'm going to identify the top row. They're a little bit hard to see, and they're kind of disguised in some way. Top left, we have Isaac Newton. Then we have Voltaire, then Mozart once again, and top right, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Who can identify, again, for students down at the bottom right, you see Einstein. Over to the left, anybody get that? Who's at the left? Beethoven, good, okay. Then the one-eared man. Well, a lot of people would get that, Van Gogh. And who's the thoughtful gentleman next to Einstein? Yeah, maybe the most far-seeing genius of them all, Nikola Tesla, but not for electric automotives. Okay, so that's the way they looked in the 18th and 19th centuries and into the early 20th century. What do they look like today? Well, genius is ever changing, right? It's not a fixed and absolute construct. Women have their contributions are going back and re-examining, trying to level the playing field. Women have been acknowledged for what they have actually contributed, and women's accomplishments are being immediately acknowledged, as was the case with up there at the top right. You can see Jennifer Doudna or Catalin Carrico, both of those involved in CRISPR and mRNA work today. Okay, so the face of genius is changing. Let's go back to our all-white men's club here of the 18th, 19th, early 20th century. What's it look like today? Well, it's a lot more variegated in terms of color. But you know this far better than I do. You don't need to have me tell you this. But the point I'm trying to make here, once again, genius is a social construct. It's whatever people want to make it be. Okay, part two, what genius is not. And this is sort of some of the things that surprised me. Okay, genius is not generational. In other words, you can't inherit and you can't pass along genius. There are a couple of exceptions to this. You've got the Bach family with some sons that were good in music. You've got the Bruegels, you've got the Wyeths, you've got the Curies, Marie and Irene, from mother to daughter. But generally speaking, it only goes through, at most, very most, one generation. So I would say genius cannot be inherited. But if it can't be inherited, passed on from generation to generation, and what is it? I like this fancy sounding word, maybe it's hard to see there, emergenesis. Emergenesis. Emergenesis is a kind of perfect storm. It's a situation in which something sort of pops out of the genetic expectation for the parents, okay? It's a perfect storm of personal characteristics, if you will. And to make this point, allow me to take you back with me from Lexington to Louisville for the 1973 Kentucky Derby. And there I was on the back fence. Well, first time I've ever been to Kentucky, I'll go to the Derby. Why not? Did I have a grandstand seat? Nope. Best I could do was getting around to it was the far turn. Out they come out of the paddock, around, they exercise out the back. All the horses are coming out. Out comes Secretary. If God were ever a horse, this is what it looks like. This horse is 25% larger than anything else out there. The chest muscles on this animal were enormous. So off they go. The interesting thing is, the horse did not come from a particularly distinguished breeding line. And although it sired 400 offspring here in the Lexington area, out of Calumet Farms, as you probably know, again, far better than I. Only one of them ever won one Triple Crown race. But this horse holds the record for all of the Triple Crown races. So it swept this, and off it went. Huge animal, the heart, which when the animal was autopsied here in Lexington, I read, weighed twice what the heart of the father did. It was the heart of Secretary, 21 pounds, twice that of the father. It's just off the charts, and it comes out of no particularly expected genetic pool. Okay, so there I am with my ticket, 3-2 odds. What do? I wait 40 minutes. Would you have waited 40 minutes to cash a $2 ticket to earn $1? I said, I'm no genius. Geniuses see the target that nobody else can see. I should have, that horse came, not only a horse of the year, horse of the century, maybe the horse of all time. I cashed it. That's not genius. That's not genius. Okay. All right. What else is genius not? Genius is not inherited wealth. Genius is not inherited wealth. Genius comes, ironically, neither from abject poverty nor from exceptional inherited wealth. Why not? And if we had time, as a teacher, I would tease out of each of the students, why not? But it's probably obvious. Abject poverty, no opportunity. Extreme wealth, inherited. No incentive. Why? You already got the world in your hands anyway. So, you can see all the people from just middle class to upper middle class backgrounds. And that's overwhelmingly, and I could go on forever adding to that left-hand column. And there are some people that do pop out of abject poverty. And you can see some of those on the screen as well. But the interesting question then here is, well, what about all the people we've lost? All those that were born in abject poverty or any kind of poverty that didn't have the opportunity. How many lost Einsteins? How many people that could have been an Einstein have been lost? That's the kind of moral dilemma here, and the kind of thing that the Parsons are doing with their scholarship program is exactly supporting scholarships to get everybody in the game on an equal footing here. Okay, third thing that genius is not, a sudden and correct calculation. Watching these films, One of these is A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, and it is, I gotta go think, I got it, that's the answer. Is that the way genius happens? No, I don't think so. Not from Darwin sails around the world for 5 years. Einstein, it takes him almost 15 years to come up with the theory of general relativity. Why does this happen in the aha, eureka moment in Hollywood films? Because we only got 2 hours to sit here. We can't wait for the 17 years for one thing or another to develop. So that notion, it's much more a kind of laborious preparation seeping through, and then the genius will happen when you don't expect it. And we'll get to that a little bit later. What else is genius not? I would suggest it's not a high IQ. Oh, she has an IQ of 135. She's a genius. Or she's so smart, she must be a genius. What does it mean to be smart? Interesting question. What does it mean to be smart? Is there a direct correlation between a high IQ and genius? Well, let me show you a video clip. We'll try this. I hope it works. A video clip featuring one Christopher Langan, who once scored the highest IQ score, then 210, ever recorded on an IQ test. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, well, don't go away. We're going to continue now. Here we are, continuing. Okay, then the question is, what are the definitive criteria of genius? Is it possible he's got some of the wrong criteria here, or at least the wrong criterion? His genius may be simply taking one particular kind of test. And I would ask, by the way, has he changed the world at all? That's part of my definition. It may not necessarily be part of yours, but has he changed the world? Yes, he worked as a bouncer, a ranch hand, nothing matter that. Perfectly honorable professions. Engaged more recently in non-political conspiracy theories, but as far as I can determine, hasn't really changed the world. So is this person an IQ, a person with this very high IQ, a genius at all? All right, let me go into my next slide here. What's the smoking proof of this? Well, there was a study done by Louis Terman at Stanford University over a 50-year period where he identified 1,500 young people, sort of slightly younger than those in the group here today, with an IQ of over 135 to be part of an experiment, the hypothesis of which was there's a direct correlation between IQ, high IQ, and genius. After 50 years, what they proved was the exact opposite of what they expected, that there was no correlation. And the final report, as you can see on the screen, said there wasn't a Nobel Prize, a Nobel laureate, there wasn't a Pulitzer Prize. We didn't have a Picasso. How many of you here know what particularly young people, have any idea what your IQ is? How many of you have taken an IQ test? It'd be interesting to know. Officially administered, sort of online test, and yeah, maybe online. It's thought that the average IQ is about 100. It's thought that to get in the range of a genius, there have people that won the Nobel Prize actually been tested, and they come in around 120 or so. So you don't have to have these stratospheric numbers at all to get in the game of genius. And by the way, how well would Beethoven have done? No, he couldn't multiply or divide. How well would Darwin have done on one of these tests? His father wrote to him once. He despaired because of his grades. He thought this young man was going to become a disgrace to his family. Muhammad Ali, I read or saw in the documentary that his high school teacher in Louisville actually had to kind of sign off on that high school certificate in order for him to graduate at all. But obviously he had a great deal of impact in the world. What about Picasso? Well, a friend of Picasso reported that Picasso actually, with his father's help, had to cheat on a fourth grade math test in order to be able to advance into the next school. And the problem was that Picasso saw numbers a somewhat different way. He didn't see them as symbolic representations of quantity, but as literal objects. A 2, for example, could be the wings of a bird, or a 0, the body of a bird, or maybe 4 ones could be taken to be fingers of some kind, or maybe the 4 limbs of the body, that sort of thing. So when you say, well, put all these together, Pablo, well, this is how he would put it together, come up with a figure such as that. The problem with the traditional measure of IQ tests, the traditional sort of thing that Chris Langan is talking about there, is that it's simply not broad enough. It doesn't measure enough of what the human capacity, human mind, human spirit can do. And what results is too many false positives, in other words, the people in the Turing test, and too many false negatives, such as Beethoven, Darwin, Ali, and Picasso. It's not a particularly accurate measure of things. Okay, part 3. So if it's not your parents' genetic inheritance, and it's not inherited wealth, and it's not a super high IQ, what are then the hidden habits of genius? Well, we could work through this bit by bit with my book here, chapter by chapter, but I want to focus here just on things that are of interest particularly to students. First of all, note up there at the top, what a waste. We've wasted half of humanity, get women in the game. But for today, we'll focus on curiosity, passion, and the key to creativity, I would submit, is relaxation. All right, about curiosity, let's start with that. Eleanor Roosevelt said, quote, "I think at a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift should be curiosity." Here's what another genius, Jeff Bezos, said about curiosity. Very interesting. "I think it's probably a survival skill that we remain curious and like to explore. Our ancestors, who were incurious and failed to explore, probably didn't live as long as the ones who were looking over the next mountain range to see if there were more sources of food and better climates, and so on and so on." Now, that's sort of an interesting idea. Curiosity helps our species survive, always looking ahead over the hill. Here are a few quotes from Albert Einstein about curiosity. "My curiosity is interfering with my work." Ever have that happen to you? You're supposed to be writing a paper, students, or something like that, and you start reading something, and you keep reading it, because it's not really relevant to your paper. So, "My curiosity is interfering with my work. I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious. It's nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry." And the last one, and he may be riffing or borrowing from Mark Twain here, "Education is what remains after one has thrown out everything learned in school." Well, I plead guilty here. Guilty as charged because I'm as guilty of being a poor instructor as anybody else. But it causes us to think about genius and curiosity. Geniuses seem to be lifetime readers. That's one thing I've discovered, lifetime readers. Geniuses seem to be lifetime learners in the same sort of way. Curious people, geniuses, they seem to be autodidacts. What's the one thing that colleges rarely, if never, ever teach you? And that's the one thing perhaps all students need to know. Well, I would say It's how to teach yourself. So we have all these grand entrance ways. I've chosen one from up there at Harvard, but we could choose anyone. And it's usually Lux and Veritas, truth and light, or whatever truth. I'm becoming kind of suspicious of what truth is these days. There's so many different opinions. But maybe what we need is discipule, dice, te, ipse docere. Student, learn to teach thyself. Because in essence, that's what you're going to have to do. So to get in there and become curious and find it out on your own. Now notice here that Einstein, when he was talking about curiosity, he used the word passion in immediate conjunction with it. He said, I am only passionately curious. So the two seem to be intertwined. And how many times have we peeped in on a graduation, whether high school or college, where the orator urges the graduates, find your passion, okay? Follow your passion, Jeff Bezos said. At Princeton, are you going to follow your passion? Well, what 21-year-old knows what their passion is? Do you guys know? How many of you know what your passion is at this point? Raise your hand. One, okay. All right, good for you. Yeah, occasionally there are people like this, as you can maybe see on the screen there. Yes, Mozart, Picasso, Einstein, they sort of knew that math and painting and physics and math were going to be their lives. But Van Gogh didn't start to paint in oils until he was 29. Gauguin was a stockbroker until he was 35. Grandma Moses, well, it speaks for itself. So, to find your passion, how is it in life that you find your passion as a young person? Well, think about that first job and what you might think you'd like to do and what your parents think you might be better to do. Are you going to follow the money, in a sense, benefits and salary? Or are you going to take on an added amount of responsibility? Find a job that gives you the most responsibility and the most opportunity to learn and perhaps to travel in life. So you'll have to decide about that. But geniuses are curious and they are passionate. Do they ever retire? No, they're so curious and passionate about what they're doing that they never do. Why? Because they're obsessive. They're obsessive. They think, rightly or wrongly, that they can fix the world. Maybe they do. Which are geniuses? Are they optimists or are they pessimists? What would you say? You think you're optimist? Raise your hand. Pessimist? Raise your hand. Okay, a few there in the back. Now, this may not be your favorite person, but he was sure in the news at the beginning of the week, right? Okay, but we'll forget about all of that news, and we'll just read the quote here. Optimists tend to be successful, and pessimists tend to be right. Interesting construct. If you think that something is going to be terrible and it's going to fail, then you're going to look for the data points that prove you are right. That's what pessimists do. But if you think that something is possible, then you're going to try to find a way to make it work. Okay, optimists make it work. Who lives longer, optimists or pessimists? Well, that's pretty straightforward, but it hadn't really been scientifically proven until recently. Article here, Harvard, Boston University study, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Quote, when individuals were compared based on their initial levels of optimism, the researchers found that the most optimistic men and women demonstrate on average an 11 to 15% longer lifespan and 50 to 70% greater odds of reaching 85 years old compared to the least optimistic groups. Interesting. Okay, be optimistic. But what about our geniuses? Don't they die young? Think about those geniuses that died young. You know, Mozart at age 35, Schubert at 31, Van Gogh, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, Kurt Cobain, people like this. Well, I sat down once and made a list of my 10 most important composers of classical music. We'll say that these are geniuses. And I would think that I would come up with a pretty good list there. And just added up their longevities and divided by 10. Average lifespan 51.4 years. 10 greatest artists. For artists, I had to go to the internet and get a consensus there. 67.2 years. Remember, you got Michelangelo figured in this, and he's lived 88. 10 greatest scientists, 75.3 years. Now, these numbers are actually off the charts in terms of life expectancies in the period in which these people live. Remember, with Michelangelo, you're going back to 15th century there. 1750, average lifespan 35 years. 1830, 40, 1900, 47 years. Only with the advent of antibiotics, I think that the numbers really go up. So, the takeaway here, get a passion. It will keep you alive. But to be passionate, you must first be, I would submit, curious, and then be willing to work. Confucius is reputed to have said, find a job that you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. From passion comes joy, but it starts strangely with pain. You ever think about that? I didn't never realize that until I was listening to the St. John's Passion one day. Passion, well, that's a crucifixion subject. You know, the root of it is passio, pain, Latin pain. And as Frida Kahlo said here, passion is the bridge that takes you from pain to change. Well, what the heck does that mean? Pain, what kind of pain? Maybe what's called creative discontent. You could imagine, that say Paul McCartney with the Beatles, he's listening to all this blues music coming out of the United States. It's all 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 5, 1 harmonic progression. Let's get something. I can't stand this. It's driving me crazy. I hate this. This has got to change. It's got to stop. And he goes on to a very different sort of harmonic progression. We could take Jeff Bezos sitting there at DLH, or whatever the hedge fund he's working for. He sees the internet churning at 2,300 times more frequently than it had the previous year. He says, shopping is really annoying me. I have to drive to this store to get this. Oh, they don't have it the wrong size. I got to go over to this store to get this. This is inefficient. It's really beginning to annoy me. Steve Jobs said, I got this in a more earthly tones here. I just got a bug up my rear that all computers should come in a plastic case. Okay, so that's a kind of creative discontent. And from that creative discontent, that passion, if you will, to fix that problem, comes transformative genius. Hard work. We have to work hard. Now, my son Andrew talked this morning at the law school, and he made an interesting point. He said, you know, a successful career, in effect, a successful career, and this brings up the question of success versus genius, but a successful career really is based on not hitting a home run every day, but just getting up there and doing the very best you can, and maybe hitting it pretty darn far every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. And maybe that ultimately is what makes genius. Maybe hard work, now that I think of it, is simply the external manifestation of passion. Maybe you work hard because you're passionate about something. That's another way of looking at these sorts of things. So we want to be curious, we want to be passionate, we want to be hardworking, we want to be full of ideas. Why and when do we have this stroke of genius? Well, you've got to have a lot of stuff in your head. You've got to be passionate about learning something. You've got to be curious. When does it happen? When you least expect it, when you are relaxed, so that all these things that you put in your head can come together. Here I throw up the notion of combinative thinking. You're relaxed. You're perhaps walking somewhere. You're thinking about this, and then you begin to daydream about something you were thinking about over there, and then suddenly something clicks when you least expect it, and they combine into a new realm, maybe the realm of orange or whatever. Well, Steve Jobs commented about this back in 1996 when he said, creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they say, quote, I just saw something. It seemed so obvious to them after a while. That's because they were able to connect experiences that they'd had and synthesize new things. Okay, connect experiences, synthesize new things. How do you combine things? How do you remove these barriers that compartmentalize information? How is it possible for you to combine people? How do you tap into your subconscious? I would submit, reading the lives of these famous people for all of these years, you relax. How do you relax? How do you relax your way to creative accomplishment? Sleeping, daydreaming even. You know, being a parent mother would kick you or something if you're daydreaming. Bad idea, let them daydream. Baths and showers, we'll come back to that. Listening to music, exercise, but probably at a moderate pace. Meditation, praying, riding on a train, experiencing nature. Humor obviously makes us laugh, and it relaxes us and makes us more creative. People have actually proved that through psychological studies. What about dreams? Well, I could go on and on here. Here's a list of people that I have bumped into. I give you whole vignettes or stories about all of these people. Stravinsky, Keith Richards, Jimi Hendrix, Billy Joel, Paul McCartney. Dreaming your way to genius. I'm going to pick just one of these, a video by McCartney. I hope I can get to play. The video may stop, but the sound will keep going. So we'll listen to a bit of this, and if it doesn't play, it's my fault. It's not coming here.
The song came to me in a dream, and so I have to believe in the magic. Some people dream about music, they wake up, they can't remember it. So I was listening to a 16-year-old Christian play this music. He said, what was it? How did it go? But I was very lucky because this tune was in my head, and I woke up some piano chords to it, and I went around for weeks asking my friends, as George Martin, Albert Dixon, John, and George Harrison, say, what is this song?
Well, the song proved to be Yesterday, as you probably know, but that's a song that came to him in a dream. And as he said there, so I have to believe in the magic of dreams. Geniuses, I've read, sleep with notepads. Einstein was staying with a friend in Manhattan. Once he decided to stay on the spur of the moment. The friend asked him, can I loan you some pajamas or something? He said, no, when I retire, I sleep entirely as nature has made me. But he did request two things, pen and paper, so that he could write down whatever it came into his mind during the night. Other famous people, Otto and Jimi Hendrix, did exactly the same thing. I'm going to focus here on the story of Otto very, very quickly. He had a dream one night. It had to do with this neurotransmitter acetylcholine. He woke up. He said, this is amazing. It's a solution. I've been looking for something for 17 years. He writes this down, went back to sleep, wakes up the next morning, can't read his handwriting. Goes back to sleep the next night. Obviously, he was obsessing about this. He wakes up. There it is again. I've got it. He doesn't wait to write it down. He goes straight to the lab and he does the experiment. It had to do, in other words, what's the point of all this? Actually, this is a very significant point. He's dealing with electronic impulses that come out of the sinus node in the heart that signal your heart to pump. And if that's not working right, you've got some kind of arrhythmia, you may be in trouble. And the whole idea of Medtronic loop recorders, Apple watches that are monitoring your fitness here, pacemakers, if things get out of control, they can force the sinus node to do what it would otherwise not do. But this a significant scientific breakthrough came during a dream. So the takeaway there is go to sleep. When do you get your best ideas? Okay, students? A, in the morning shower. B, concentrating at your desk. C, when called upon in class. I mean, A? Probably probably the least chosen would be C, right? That's stress time. That's when you're least relaxed. Why might that be the case? Well, as you see here, evidence for that. 2016 survey, Business Insider. 72% of Americans get their best ideas in a shower. Why in the shower? No distractions, white noise, relaxing water. Water is a relaxant here. Residue of acetylcholine, which Otto was working on, so you're relaxed. How to get relaxed? Take a walk. Nothing more simple, more difficult than that. And here you see all of the people, and we could have a list of 20 of this. I like Louisa May Alcott's statement here. I am so full of my work, I can't stop to eat or sleep. She's got a lot of stuff in her head. Or for anything else but a daily run. And that must have been very unusual, seeing a woman sort of run out there on a daily basis in 19th century America. You could let the vehicle do the work. I always find when I get in a train, or maybe riding a car, particularly not so much a car, but a train, going back and forth across the tracks, it's very relaxing, and it kind of puts you almost asleep, but in that semi-sleep state, great things happen. Walt Disney thought up Mickey Mouse on a train from Manhattan to LA. J.K. Rowling thought up on one long train trip from Manchester to London the essence of the Harry Potter series. Anything sort of mindless repetition that doesn't require you to focus, to concentrate, can be beneficial. Toni Morrison. She said she would brood, thinking of ideas while mowing the lawn in Queens, New York. George Balanchine. When I'm ironing, that's when I do most of my work. Grant Wood, well, he came from Iowa, and here's what, so he knew what he was talking about. All the good ideas I've ever had came to me while I was milking a cow. Okay, we're going to wrap this up now in a minute or two. How to think like a genius, recommendation for students and young people. Spend your money on, not on things, but on experiences. Satisfy your curiosity. Be less concerned about your grades than you are about the difficulty and variety of the courses that you are taking. Carve out independent study courses and tutorials. You have those in the honors program here. I was reading the handbook. Take courses that will make you a good writer, and you have those here also in your honors program. First job, don't be afraid. And my son Andrew, we could have talked about this. Don't be afraid to go to the big city. Now you're already in the big city. You have to. Geniuses always go to one of two places, almost exceptionally, unless you're a landscape artist or something like that. They go to a metropolis or they go to a university. So you're in a kind of mid-sized metropolis here, and you're at a university. They go to one of two places. Why? Because that's where the competition is, that's where the money is, that's where the opportunity is. Test yourself against the very best. So don't be afraid to move here. And once again, with the first job, it's not the money or benefits, I would submit, but the amount of responsibility that you're given and the opportunities that you have to learn. For the rest of us, for adults or older people, gentlemen in particular, we hate to get lost, right? We're losing control. We always have to be in control. Don't look at it that way. I'm not lost. I'm just exploring. Okay? Keep pen and paper when you ride in a train or in your shower or bed. Thank you, Melanie. That was a Christmas gift that you see in from a kind daughter-in-law Christmas gift that we have in our master bedroom. Wife Sherry can account to that. When you get out of bed, don't get out. When you wake up in the morning, don't get out of bed. Don't get out of it. Oh, I got to be productive today. Just spend 5 minutes sitting there thinking. A couple of things. Your mind is probably freest. You still have that residue of acetylcholine, which kind of seeps away over a 20-minute period, which is a disinhibitor that allows you to have these creative ideas. You may remember some of the things that you were thinking about subconsciously in your dreams. So don't get out of bed. Just stay there. You can be more productive. Other things you can do, listen to music, exercise, but ditch the Fitbits. They don't help you. You don't want to focus on the exercise. You just want to relax, go with the flow, mow the lawn, vacuum, do the ironing, buy a cow. Okay, everybody on board with this? A couple final thoughts for really old people. I really like this one about passion and longevity here. The secret of life, said the sculptor Henry Moore, who lived to be 88. The secret of life is to have a task, something you devote your entire life to, something you bring everything to every minute of every day for the rest of your life. And the most important thing is it must be something that you cannot possibly do. Yeah, that's right. Get you out of bed in the morning. So, say you must do something that you cannot possibly do. Well, that's an oxymoron. It's a paradox. Contrarian thinking here, but that's the basis of all humor. Humor brings laughter into the world. And when we laugh, we relax, and we become more creative. So with that thought, I'm going to leave you with one final quip here. Actually, of pianist Oscar Levant. What the world needs is more genius with humility. There's so few of us left. Thank you very much for listening. So we're doing okay for time. If I could have you for another 3 or 4 minutes, is that okay, Laura? Yeah, for questions, because this is what I enjoy. Yeah.
Invite questions. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
You invite questions,
questions,
and because we are streaming, we would like to use the microphone. So if you can kind of meet me halfway, I'll hand you the microphone. So we have any questions?
Questions or objections? What I just heard was nonsense. Anybody want to say that? Or have you considered this?
I'm
When you consider genius, do you think that genius is something that can only truly be awarded after someone is gone? I.e., like their impact can't be, I guess, seen until later on after their lifetime?
That's a good question. It happens many times. J.S. Bach, for example, was one of those. The painter Vermeer painted all these wonderful things. In only 200 years was his work discovered. How many paintings did Van Gogh sell during his own lifetime? One, and that was to a relative. But by the flip side, you have other people that were hugely impactful and were thought of as geniuses in their own lifetime. Beethoven, Wagner in music, Picasso in painting. In the sciences today, we can recognize them through the Nobel Prizes. Jennifer Doudna, again, as aforementioned. Catalin Carrico will probably be a winner of the Nobel Prize rather frequently. In terms of today, I would have to say people like Jeff Bezos with Amazon. I mean, that's hugely impactful, right? I hardly go shopping. You shouldn't be so lazy, but gee, you just push a button and there it is the next day. That's a real game changer. Elon Musk, it's not only Tesla, it's the whole idea of powering the world through things other than fossil fuels. That's a big game changer too, and they are both alive. So it's a good question, and it works both ways. You can give examples, pro and con. Gentleman out here in the blue shirt, you had your hand.
Actually, I got my answer from your response. I wanted to know, how do you differentiate between the geniusness of Albert Einstein with the Mahatma Gandhi?
At that point, you get into, that's a good question. Let me repeat the question. How do you differentiate between the genius of Mahatma Gandhi and the genius of Albert Einstein? And I think the answer is you don't. It's the difference between a beautiful racehorse at Keeneland and a Porsche automobile. They're both spectacular. They're both beautiful. Which is more beautiful? Which is more spectacular? Neither. We're not talking about genius here, but just comparative. They're just so different that we can't get them into the same orbit to be able to give a point score. Oh, we're going to give more to Gandhi because of the social impact, or more to Einstein because of the scientific impact. So we just have to keep them categorized. Maybe we should have a Hall of Fame for scientific geniuses over here, and a Hall of Fame for ideology over here, and where we would put King and Gandhi, for example. But another good question. Thank you. Good heavens.
Well,
Either A, you've been a very good audience and I've tired you out and it's a little bit warm and it's time to go on. It's homecoming, right? LSU is coming to town.
right,
Keeneland opens tomorrow, right?
right.
So get out there and enjoy, okay? And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Before you all leave, I do want to thank again the Office of Philanthropy and Scott and Kelly Parsons for their support, and especially Dr. Craig Wright. And we've got a couple bags of goodies here for you from the Lewis Honors College, because again, it was a real privilege to host you today. And thank you for your inspiring remarks.
Thank you.
Let's thank him again.
Okay.
All right, have a good evening, everyone.